Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper reading. Today we will discuss the daily edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 8th November 2019. And we will discuss the articles displayed on your screen. So let us start our discussion. Now this article on page number 11 has been written in the context of one of the biggest social media platforms, that is Twitter, which has announced recently that it will not carry any political advertising. And in this regard, this article reads that should online political advertising be regulated? Now, although Twitter has announced that it will not carry any political advertising, Facebook, on the other hand, has said that it will allow political advertising and will not fact check such advertisements, as doing so might amount to stifling of freedom of speech. Now, as against the argument of Facebook, Twitter has argued that political advertising brings significant risks to the politics and it can be used for influencing voting behavior. So in this article, we will try to understand how is online political advertising different from other forms of political advertisings, as has been discussed in this article. And after that, we will look at some of the suggestions which have been provided in this article as to what needs to be done for regulating the political advertising. So this will form part of General Studies paper 2. So now let us look at how is the online political advertising different from other forms of political advertisements. Now the authors in this article have argued that political advertising has always existed. For example, the political parties have been giving advertisements in magazines, newspapers, etc. However, such advertisings in the popular magazines and newspapers is different as compared to the present day online political advertising. And why is it different? So it is different because micro-targeting of people is possible on online platforms like Facebook. Now the advertisements in the magazines and newspapers were visible to all those people who have subscribed to those newspapers or magazines. Now the issue with online political advertising is that such advertisements can be used for personalized targeting of people. And the target group is decided by the online platform based on the personal preferences of the people on this platform. And also these platforms monitor the previous activities of the people on this platform and accordingly they target them with political advertising. And as such, an alternative point of view is not available to those people. And that is why it can amount to political manipulation. So that is one of the biggest fears of political advertising online. So in this context, it has been said that micro-targeting of people is possible on online platforms like Facebook. And that is one of the biggest cause of concern because it aims at manipulating the voting behavior of people. Second issue is that such political advertisements which are on online platforms are invisible to general public. And that is mainly because such advertising is personalized in nature. And it is in contrast to the advertisements which are provided in popular newspapers, magazines or on hoardings. Now how this personalized targeting can influence the voting behavior? So it is said that such political advertisements which are on online platforms can be used for targeting people based on caste and religion. And this might ultimately breed the issue which already our politics is facing, that is vote bank politics. And as discussed earlier, it is argued that micro-targeting of people or personalized targeting of people on social media platforms makes it possible to manipulate consent rather than manufacturing consent. Now here it is to be understood what is the difference between manipulating consent and manufacturing consent. Now manufacturing consent means that political parties give out their advertisements as to what have been their past achievements and what these political parties aim to do in the upcoming elections, and which is reflected in their political manifestos. And that is how people can weigh the political manifestos and past achievements of parties which are involved in the election and can develop an informed opinion on the issue. And that is known as manufacturing consent. And in this process, people have both the alternative opinions available in front of them. Now, by manipulating consent, which is mostly possible on the online political advertising platforms, you should note that people on social media platforms are targeted based on their preferences, and they are not able to view the alternative point of views which are available. And that is how, by bombarding them with similar kind of advertisements, their voting behavior and political behavior can be manipulated. So that is one of the biggest concern as to micro-targeting makes it possible to manipulate consent rather than manufacturing consent. Now, one of the examples of manipulating consent is the recent Cambridge Analytica Facebook case of 2018. And this case highlighted that Cambridge Analytica accessed the personal data of almost 50 million users on Facebook. And they used this personalized data to target these people based on their past preferences, likes and dislikes, and status which they posted on the Facebook. And that is how they tried to manipulate the behavior of people who are on these platforms. So such cases highlight that the online political advertisements can be misused, and also they can be used for manipulating the voting behavior and manipulating the consent of people. Now, such manipulations have also been visible in the voting related to Brexit, etc. And that is why it is one of the biggest cause of concern for democracies across the world. So in this background, let us understand what are the suggestions that have been provided by this article regarding regulation of online political advertising. So firstly, it has been argued that the Representation of People Act, which is the main act for governing the elections in India, mandates that people should be allowed to take a very clear stand and to look at what has happened in the last 5 years and then decide how to vote freely and fairly. And because of this mandate, it clearly lists a certain set of things for free and fair elections, and which includes the use of money and manipulation should not be allowed to happen. And as we have learned that the online political advertisements are prone to manipulation by the use of money. And that is why the authors have argued that the Election Commission should step in and look at all these issues from the mandate which has been provided by the Representation of People Act. Now, besides the role of Election Commission, the role of social media platforms need to be made accountable. And they need to bring out all the ways in which these advertisements are displayed, which refers to the algorithms which are used by these social media platforms to target certain people, and also how much money is being used in such kind of political advertisements. So these social media platforms should disclose the algorithms which is being used to target people, and also how much money is being used for such political advertisements. Further, it has been argued that all those legislations which apply for reasonable restrictions on freedom of speech and freedom of press should also apply to these social media platforms, especially when it comes to online political advertisements. Further, it has been argued that besides Facebook, Twitter, etc., which are social media platforms, WhatsApp, which is a messaging platform, is also used for online political messaging in India. And this is the biggest source of online political messaging in India. So it has been argued that Election Commission should also bring platforms like WhatsApp on board. And further, the Election Commission should bring the largest platforms together and to get transparency commitments from them. And whatever information the Election Commission gets from these social media platforms needs to be made publicly available. And that is how the issue of invisibility in the case of online political advertisements can be targeted. So these are few of the concerns related to online political advertisements. And further, these are some of the suggestions which have been provided for countering the issues which are generated because of online political advertisements. Now, besides these, we have seen in the DNS of 27 September 2019 a news article related to Election Commission's cell to monitor the fake news. And in this article, we have looked at the voluntary code of ethics for social media platforms. So you can revise these aspects related to social media and elections from the DNS of 27 September 2019. And with this, let's take up the next article. This article on page number 9 is related to a report by the name India Justice Report 2019. and it was released by the Tata Trust in collaboration with Center for Social Justice, Common Cause and Commonwealth Human Rights Initiative. Now, a unique fact regarding this report is that this is the first ever ranking of Indian states on justice delivery. So, in this regard, let us look at some of the key highlights of this report. Now, this report ranks Indian states on the basis of four parameters, and these all parameters are important for the justice delivery system. So, these four parameters include policing, prisons, judiciary, and the legal aid which is available to the vulnerable sections. Now, there is an overall ranking based on the performance of various states on these four parameters. And also, there are individual rankings based on all single parameters. For example, in terms of policing, Tamil Nadu has topped with a score of about 6.4 now. However, UP was at the bottom with a score of only 2.98. Further, as far as prison administration was concerned, Kerala was ranked on the top. And in case of judiciary, Tamil Nadu was on the top of all the states. However, on all four parameters, Maharashtra is on the top. So let us look at what are the rankings of different states and what are the highlights of this report. Now, the ranking of the states according to this report for the large and the mid-sized states states that top performing states include Maharashtra, Kerala and Tamil Nadu, while the worst performing states include Uttar Pradesh, Bihar and Jharkhand. And in the small states, top performing states are Goa, Sikkim and Himachal Pradesh. However, worst performing states are from northeastern India, and these include Tripura, Arunachal Pradesh and Meghalaya. Another important aspect highlighted by this report is the huge vacancies in the judicial systems of different states. For example, it highlights that there are about 25% vacancies in many states as compared to the sanctioned strength of judges in the judiciary. And overall, India has a vacancy of about 18,200 judges. And this highlights that 23% of the sanctioned posts in the judiciary are lying vacant. And this is one of the reasons for poor delivery of justice or pendency of cases in the judicial system. Second is that women are poorly presented in all the four pillars of justice. That is, women do not have proper representation in judiciary, police, prisons, etc. And one of the important data which is highlighted by this report, which shows that there is poor representation of women in police, is that women represent only 7% in the total police in India. So this shows that women are poorly represented in the police force of India. The third aspect is related to the budgets for justice system of various states. And this report highlights that most of the states are not able to fully utilize the budgets which have been allocated to them by the center. And further, although there has been considerable increase in the expenditure of the state governments, there has been lack of increase in the spending on police, prisons and judiciary. So this shows that the increase in spending on police, prisons and judiciary has not been keeping pace with the overall increase in the state expenditure. And the last aspect which is highlighted by the report is the poor case clearance rates. Now here it should be understood that the case clearance rates refer to the number of cases which are cleared in a year as compared to the number of cases which are filed in that year. And if this case clearance rate is higher for a state, it will reduce the number of pending cases in the judicial system of that state. However, this report highlights that only some of the states have a high case clearance rate, and this is leading to increased pendency and delay in the disposal of cases. So these are few issues which have been highlighted by this report, that is the India Justice Report of 2019, related to the performance of the judicial systems across states. And these points can be highlighted in writing answers related to the issues with the judicial systems in India. With this, let's take up the next article. Now, this article on page number 2 is related to a report published by the Vidhi Center for Legal Policy, and it is related to the implementation of RTI Act by the High Courts. So this will form a part of the General Studies paper 2 under the topic Constitution and Polity. So this article basically highlights the issues with the implementation of RTI Act by the High Courts. So in this regard, let us look at some of the important findings of this report. And also we will look at the arguments for and against the inclusion of judiciary under the RTI. So first let us look at some of the issues that are present in the implementation of RTI Acts by the High Courts. First is that many High Courts have framed rules which stand in contravention to the letter and spirit of the RTI Act. Now here it should be noted that the RTI Act allows various institutions to decide the procedure in which they want to give the information under the RTI Act. And accordingly, these institutions can create their own rules for the giving out of information. And in this case, various high courts have created rules which stand against the mandate of the RTI Act. And one of the example is the violation of Section 8 of the RTI Act. Now, Section 8 of the RTI Act mainly deals with the disclosure of information which is related to security and sovereignty of the country. And this Section 8 of the RTI Act exempts such information which is important for security and sovereignty of India. And in this case, high courts have created various rules which do not deal with the security and sovereignty of the nation, and thus they stand in contravention to the mandate of the RTI Act. Further, the procedure for application under the RTI Act is complicated in the high courts. And in many cases, fee payment for the information under the RTI Act has to be done through the procedure of court stamp only. And there is no provision for online payment of fees under the RTI Act. And this deters applicants from asking for information from these courts. So in short, the high courts have created complicated procedures for the applicants who are seeking information under the RTI Act. Now the next issue is related to the failure to automatically disclose information. Now here you should note that the Section 4.1 of the RTI Act mandates that some information should be disclosed automatically by the public entities. However, high courts have failed to automatically disclose information under this section of the RTI Act. And most of the high courts have not been giving out information related to administrative procedures and also related to the budgets of these courts. And this stands against the clause of transparency which has been enshrined in the RTI Act. Further, when it comes to the implementation of the RTI Act, the high courts are lagging far behind the central government in this case. And these are few of the issues which have been highlighted by the Vidhi Center for Legal Policy on the implementation of RTI Act by high courts. Now here it should be noted that Supreme Court does not come under the ambit of RTI Act. However, high courts and the lower judiciary comes under the ambit of RTI Act presently. Now what are the arguments in favor of including higher judiciary or the Supreme Court under the ambit of RTI Act? So let us look at them. First is that higher judiciary or judiciary has not been mentioned under the Section 24 of the RTI Act. Here it should be noted that this Section 24 of the RTI Act provides for exemption of certain institutions from being included under the RTI Act, and these are related to the security of the nation. For example, it includes intelligence agencies under the Section 24, and those agencies are exempted from the RTI Act. Now, since judiciary has not been mentioned under the Section 24 of the RTI Act, and as we know that this section exempts certain institutions from being brought under the RTI Act, the argument is that judiciary should be included under the RTI. Second argument is that financial matters like expenditures of the courts are huge, and that is why such disclosure of the financial matters of the courts will bring in huge accountability. Third issue is related to the operation of or the manner in which the collegium system operates. Now, one of the issues with the collegium system is that it operates in total secrecy, and it does not divulge any information that is being discussed in the collegium system. So by bringing the judiciary under the RTI Act, such information can be brought in the view of public, and that will improve the accountability of the collegium system to the general public. Now, one of the fears is that if judiciary is brought under RTI Act, it will divulge the private information of the judges. However, you should note that the Section 10 of the RTI Act protects any private information, and hence there is no threat of judges' private information coming into the public. So these are few of the arguments for bringing in the Supreme Court under the RTI Act. However, there are various counter arguments which argue that Supreme Court should not be brought under the purview of RTI Act. The first in this line is the separation of power, and it states that by bringing judiciary under the RTI Act, separation of power between the executive and the judiciary would be violated. And this issue is mainly because if judiciary is brought under the RTI Act, and if there is any instance of non-compliance of the RTI Act by the judiciary, the Central Information Commission will be empowered to impose penalty on judiciary. So this shows that CIC, which is appointed by the executive, will hold the judiciary accountable. And this stands against the principle of separation of power. Further, second concern is that if the collegium system is brought under the purview of RTI Act, various discussions which happen under the collegium system will be brought in the public purview. However, if such discussions are brought under the view of public, there will be no frank discussion in the collegium system while appointing the judges. And as such, all those judges whose appointment has been rejected will not be able to function in a proper manner. So these are few arguments in favor of bringing the Supreme Court under the ambit of RTI, and also these are few arguments which are against bringing the judiciary under the purview of RTI. And with this, let's take up the next article. Now this article on page number 5 is related to an issue known as Office of Profit. And in this case, the Punjab Assembly has passed the Punjab State Legislature Amendment Bill 2019, which is related to the prevention of disqualification. And this amendment has been done in order to exclude 6 ruling MLAs who were appointed as advisors to the CM from being disqualified on the basis of Office of Profit. And if this position of advisors to the CM fell under the category of Office of Profit, all these MLAs would have been disqualified. So in order to exempt these positions from the Office of Profit category, such amendment bill has been passed. So this will fall under the General Studies paper 2 under the topic Constitution and Polity. So in this article, we will try to understand what constitutes Office of Profit and also what are the constitutional provisions related to the Office of Profit. Now here it is important to note that any member of Parliament or any member of the Legislative Assembly, if holds an Office of Profit under the Government of India or any state government, he can be disqualified. And this has been provided in the various provisions of the Constitution of India under various articles like the Article 102 and the Article 191. Now what happens is that in such cases, the Parliament or the state legislative assemblies pass law to exempt certain offices from being considered as Office of Profit. And accordingly, the Punjab State Legislative Assembly has passed the law to exempt the position of advisors to the CM being exempted from the Office of Profit category. So in this line, let us understand what is meant by this term Office of Profit. Now, Office of Profit means that any person who is holding any position or office, and by holding that position or office, if the person is getting some financial gain, advantage, benefits or perks, then such office or position will be considered as Office of Profit. However, this term Office of Profit has not been defined under the Indian Constitution, and that is why there are various interpretations of this term Office of Profit. So the Joint Committee of Parliament on Office of Profit has observed that this expression Office of Profit has not been defined under the Indian Constitution. It has also not been defined under the Representation of People Act and also under the Parliament Prevention of Disqualification Act, etc. Further, it has also not been defined in any judgment delivered either by a High Court or the Supreme Court, and that makes it ambiguous and which is being utilized by various state legislative assemblies to their advantage. Now, if any MLA or MP is found to be holding the Office of Profit, then such MLA or MP can be disqualified. And this decision on disqualification is taken on a case-to-case basis by the courts and the Election Commission of India. And in such cases, the Election Commission of India advises the president or the governor of the state in case of MLAs, and the governor and president are bound by the advice given by the Election Commission of India. So, for example, if there is an MLA X, and if such MLA is holding a position under the government for which he or she is getting an extra perk or getting benefits and has been allocated extra resources to meet the needs of this extra office, then such a position will be considered as an office of profit. And this is because this MLA is already holding a constitutional position and for which this MLA is already getting perks and benefits. So if any MLA is holding any office besides the constitutional office of MLA, that position will be considered as office of profit. Now, the Supreme Court of India has not clearly defined the term office of profit. However, they have provided various pointers in certain judgments which can be used for determining if an office falls under the category of office of profit or not. And some of these include whether the appointment for such office has been done by the government, whether the government pays the remuneration for that position, etc. And all these provisions have been provided in your PDF. So you can go through them and use those pointers. So these were few points related to the office of profit. And there was a question which was asked in the year 2018 in the preliminary examination related to the office of profit. So we will try and solve that question in the practice question section in today's discussion. With this, let's take up the next article. Now, this article on page number 14 talks about Iran's resumption of uranium enrichment at the Fordow plant. Now, here it should be noted that Iran had finalized an agreement with the P5+1 countries. And these included 5 permanent members of the Security Council and 1 was Germany. And this comprehensive nuclear deal was known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, and which is also commonly known as the Iran nuclear deal. However, after Donald Trump became the president of United States of America, he has withdrawn from this Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. And that is why Iran has once again started the uranium enrichment at its nuclear facilities. And in the second news article on page number 14, India has said that border with Nepal has not been altered. Now, in both these articles, we'll look at the locations that have come up. And these locations can be important for us from the preliminary examination point of view. And if you look at the previous year question of 2018, it reads that consider the following pairs, and it says towns sometime mentioned in news and the country to which they belong. And that is why such locations are important for us from the preliminary examination point of view. So let us look at some of these locations which have been mentioned in these articles. Now, the Atomic Energy Agency has said that Iran has resumed the uranium enrichment at 2 of its sites. First is the Natanz and the second is Fordow. So here the names of these 2 sites can be extremely important for us from the preliminary examination point of view. Secondly, Nepal has claimed that India has included Kalapani in the state of Uttarakhand in the new map which was released by India. However, India has refuted this. So again, the location of this Kalapani can be important for us from the preliminary examination point of view. So in both these articles, you should keep in mind the locations that have been mentioned. Now, after today's discussion, let's take up these questions and the answer will be displayed after 5 seconds. Now, the first question, and this was asked in the year 2019 in the preliminary examination. So the first statement reads, the Parliament Prevention of Disqualification Act 1959 exempts several posts from disqualification on the grounds of office of profit. Secondly, the above mentioned act was amended 5 times. And the third statement is that the term office of profit is well defined in the Constitution of India. Now we know that this term has not been well defined in the Constitution of India, and hence the third statement is incorrect. Hence, by this you can easily eliminate the options B, C and D, and the correct answer is A, that is 1 and 2 only. Second question is that Natanz and Fordow, sometimes mentioned in news, are located in which of the following country? So as we have learned, they are located in Iran. Again, this question was asked in the year 2018 in the preliminary examination, and it reads, consider the following pairs, towns sometimes mentioned in news and the country in which they are located. Now, the first three locations, Aleppo, Kirkuk and Mosul, were in news because of occupation by the ISIS or the Islamic State. In this, the first pair is correctly matched because Aleppo is located in Syria. However, Kirkuk and Mosul are located in Iraq and not in Yemen and Palestine. Fourth location, Mazar-e-Sharif, is located in Afghanistan and it witnessed a major bomb blast in the year 2018, and that is why it was in news in that year. And the correct answer here is B, that is 1 and 4 only. With this, we conclude today's discussion. Now let's take up the question for the day.